I'm here with two wonderful authors, and we all have slightly different perspective. Um, I, of course, am an M&A advisor, so I think of it from that perspective. Kathryn is the business owner who really started with an idea on a kitchen table and built something, literally turning straw into gold. I mean, it's amazing what business owners do. And then, of course, we've got Kelley, who comes at it more from the buyer perspective with a PE background. So I'm going to start with the business owner. Um, You've had a number of businesses at this point. Tell us about your business journey. Let's do kind of an overview before we get into the details.
Sure. Well, thank you all for coming tonight. I really do appreciate you guys being here. My journey is very similar probably to some of you that are sitting in the audience. I was in industry, GovCon industry for about 7 years or so, and felt that I was ready for me to move into management. Got my MBA from the University of Maryland. I was ready to be in that leadership role. That role was not afforded me, I'll use that term, but the person that they hired, there's a few gentlemen in the room, so don't take this personal, but the person that they hired was a gentleman who they asked me to train, and that was the catalyst. It's like, that's not sitting too well with me, and so, but I didn't know what I was going to do. I continued to work at the same job and train my new boss while I was trying to come up with a strategy for what I would do next. And it was my husband who encouraged me to start a business. I'm from Alabama. My father had a sixth-grade education. I knew nothing about what that even meant. I did not know what entrepreneurship was, let alone trying to start a business from scratch. Didn't know it. And so, but I continued to do that and started researching what that really meant. This was before the internet. Unless you had to go to the library and figure out who SBA was, that type of thing. But long story short, we entered into being an entrepreneur. And my background is ops, finance, and all that. And his background was marketing and business development. We pulled those two disciplines together, and we started a company. It was Freeland and Associate. I was Freeland. He was the associate. Of course, that was right. Of course, that's how it worked. But we continued to work in our full-time jobs while we were doing this. And oh, by the way, as women do, I got pregnant at the same time. And so that's a different story. But I had twin daughters that kind of grew up with me as we were starting this business. Well, as a result of all of that, though, we were able to scale slowly but surely until we were able to get our first contract. It was $25,000. That was big in 1993. But that was the thing that kind of set us off and kind of got us started. And it took 3 years in the basement of our house before we were able to win a contract where we could actually hire someone to do the work. And when they asked, can you do this? Or can you do that? Of course we can. Had no clue what we were doing. But we figured it out. And that's what we do. We figured it out. And so long story short, Freeland Associates turned into RG2 Technologies. RG2 is named after my son, who lived only 50 days. And so our journey became a personal one. It was a journey toward healing and also a journey toward remembering his legacy. And so we built RG2 and we sold RG2 10 years later. And so I've been on the sales side of the table. And all this time we grew that in the federal government contracting space. And so in 2003, when we sold, I stayed on for 3 years with the acquiring company, myself, my CFO, and my husband, Greg, and transitioned out in 2006. What I didn't tell you along the way, 18 months after I lost my son, my twin daughters were born. And so as they were transitioning to high school, I was home with them for 4 years, and then we acquired the company that I'm the CEO of today, which is ATEC. So in between those two pieces, I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you so much for sharing that. It is such a compelling story, both very personal, but also very reflective of the world. That is, I see so many companies that are husbands and wives working together. I see so many companies where they kind of roll their eyes and say, yes, I'm working with my spouse, I understand. the growing it, having no idea what you're doing, saying, what is the SBA and why should I care about it? The tenacity to keep it going is so much a part of the story of the business owner. So, Kelley, let me turn to you. Tell me about your business journey.
So great to be with you all. Thank you so much for being here. My journey is a little bit different, a lot of zigs and zags. Nothing that was really, if you'd asked me if I was going to end up where I am now, I would not have even thought about being a part of private equity. So I grew up as a data girl, had the fortunate experience to be a part of an executive team that was private equity backed with one of the most phenomenal founders. I'm often told you'll never find that again. Who was just really a good human and did the right things. And when he took on private equity, he chose not to take the highest bidder. And at the time, that meant that was money that was not going to go into his pocket because he believed in what was going to happen next. He wanted to make sure the clients were okay, the employees were okay. And it was profound for me and had a real impact for me on how I looked at private equity. And you hear all these bad stories about private equity. And so I thought I'd write a good story about private equity. And in the book, I call them Billisms. There's lessons about how he grew the company and the way he decided to lead. And as a business owner, started my own business with Foreign Group. We supported portfolios in private equity and also founders and startups and helping them on the technology side. So we were technology operating partners. We did a lot of due diligence, looking at companies to acquire, sat on a lot of deal teams. McLennan Group became a subsidiary of New Harbor Capital in Chicago. So I also have found the, how do I introduce myself after I'm no longer the CEO and founder of McLennan Group? And so more recently, I started my own business, two businesses. One, Kelley W. Powell, because I'm very much into fashion and shoes for a very personal journey that I've gone through. And also for helping founders and creating the pipeline. Because when I decided, what am I going to do next? There were some people, some in the crowd, who said, you love to help founders. You light up when you do that. Why don't you start a business doing that? And so I started a company called Furway, and the Furway Group. You have to read the background. You can go on the website and learn why I decided to pick that name. But in short, it's about going through a journey and have a joy along the way. So now I help business founders and owners in growing their business as a fractional team. Most recently, a chief growth officer at a health tech company, because I think we should know about the secrets. We have to go through the process, and there's so much, especially for women business owners, that you don't know and you don't experience. So I decided I'd write a book about what was my experience. Some others could maybe learn a little bit before they really need it.
That's wonderful. And I really appreciate you sharing that. One of the things that I loved about both the book as well as what you were just saying is so many of our business owners don't take the highest price. That the highest price may not necessarily be the deal that it is you want to do. Now, I come out of a very different environment. I come out of, I'm in a 12-step program of forgiveness. I'm a recovering attorney and practiced law at some very fancy firms, and the dollars were big and the number of zeros were large, and it was all about the money. And as I got into this part of the market, it's not all about the money anymore. The money matters. I don't want to say that it doesn't, but it is one of a multitude of factors. And we've seen business owners not take an offer because they don't think that that buyer is going to be able to keep their employees satisfied, that they're not going to be able to do the work at the level that their customers expect. So understanding that M&A, building a company, what you're doing, is not solely about the numbers, but rather it's about the environment that you've created around it is so important, and really appreciate that in your book. my route is a little bit circuitous as well. In some ways, Kathryn has the most direct route, starts a company, grows a company, sells a company, takes some time off, and then starts another company or buys a company. Yours is a little bit more circuitous, kind of like mine. Again, I practiced law, then worked in PE-backed companies, started my first investment bank in 2009 with some colleagues, sold that and said, what the heck am I going to do with myself? Kind of like what you were just talking about. And what happened is that as I was having this existential crisis, do I work in law? Do I work in business? Do I start a company? What do I do? A friend came to me and said, Sharon, I've had my company for 20 years. I've tried to sell it 3 times. I've not been able to. Would you help me try and sell my company? And I kind of shrugged my shoulders and said, well, I do M&A. I've been doing that decades. Let me give it a try. It was so different. I loved it. I loved working with the founder owner. Now, I don't want to offend anybody here, but the founder owner is crazy. Let us just own the fact that the founder owner is crazy.
You can see that because all 3 of us.
Exactly.
So, crazy knows crazy is all.
Crazy knows crazy. These are people who give up a salary. These are people who basically jump. They leap off of a cliff, and then they take on a payroll responsibility. And how are these things going to happen? They also are emotionally committed to their companies. Their companies are like a child. You raised 2 young daughters? Well, you raised a company in the same time. And understanding how tied business owners are is such an important component part of the kind of work that we do. And I think that it runs as a theme throughout the books that we wrote. I'd like to turn to you, Kathryn, and say, did you have fear? Was fear something that was present for you, and how did you deal with it?
Absolutely, yes.
In other words, you're not insane.
Exactly. So no, I was risk averse. My dad worked for the same company for 40 years, and his direction to his 4 daughters, and that direction was you get a good job, you get a good education, a good job, you marry a great man, you do it in that order. You work there for like 40 years, collect your watch, and all is well with the world. But I was terrified because when you have to give up a full-time salary and you live off of whatever savings we had, which wasn't much, and finance the business using credit cards because you couldn't get a small business loan from the very agency and banks that say they're small business friendly. Couldn't do that. And so there was fear there, so when we had to make payroll and you were on the payroll, so what do you do, right? And so lots of fear there, the fear of the unknown, the fear of whether or not this is something, can we really do this? Do we have enough faith in ourselves and in our higher power to get us through those tough times? And, I got these 2 babies here, and can they be fed? It was just the house and all this stuff that needed to be paid for, and there was no income. So very much fearful. But how did I get through that? And you'll read about this in the book. It's all about the faith foundation. And I know we don't talk about that much in business and all that, but without it, I would not be here today. And so all that fear ultimately subsided, and I became a risk taker. Not just my husband, but more than I used to be. And so now I'm not afraid, to do that anymore, to take that leap of faith. Because at the end of the day, it was something that was ours. And we were being blessed to be the ones who were leading the pack. And we're also now helping other families. Everything that we do is about how we make certain our staff is being able to take care of their families. And so it's worth going to Erg. Okay? So that fear is gone now.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And this is one of the reasons why this is a women's event. We're going to actually talk about fear, because fear is huge in business. And people who don't acknowledge it are basically refusing to see what's going on with a lot of people. Kelley, was there ever a time that you were dealing with fear in your career, your life? You're already smirking. So I think the answer is yes.
It might be easier to ask me when it wasn't. One of the things that I did in starting the business, because I had been on deal teams. So fun fact that's not in the book. I was part of the deal team that was trying to buy the company that I talk about in the story back. After the original sale, I was asked to join on a deal team to look at acquiring the company back and being committed to being on the management team again after I left. We didn't win. We were talking earlier that sometimes not winning is winning, and I think it would have been the same. So in some ways, I'm really glad that we didn't win, but you also put in as much effort in a PE process, whether you win or don't win. So sometimes that's really hard. But I went to private equity that I had worked with and served on teams for, and I said, I think there's this business of where you be more of a boutique shop to do some of the work that, some teams, and sorry if you're in this room and you do, but charging an astronomical price for some of the work that we could do. I had a founder say to me, actually this past week, yeah, but you don't have to pay for that. That comes out of the deal after the transaction. And you do pay for it. It could have been money that you could have given to an employee who didn't have equity, and you could have changed their life. So that's how I look at it, is how you're spending the money as if it were your own. And so I started talking to private equity and said, I have this idea. I want to start a business. About 6 months before we started with Foreign Group. Would you be a client? Am I crazy, or would you be a client? Everyone told me they would love for me to do this. Can I start the next day? It would be amazing. And I thought, I sure hope they're not all blowing smoke up my shirt. Because I decided to start a business, and we were really lucky because we immediately had clients, paying clients, but it's slightly disingenuous because I was talking and doing the business development 6 months in advance before we had the business, which, by the way, I highly recommend starting a business with customers.
Absolutely. Next question is going to be to you, which is, talk about being a woman in business. What kind of challenges have you faced because you're a woman?
So private equity doesn't have a lot of women. And so walking into the room, I know we've experienced this, where if there's 500 people, there's 10 of us. And how I dealt with that was I said, okay, we're going to meet for lunch, or we're going to meet for breakfast, or we're going to meet for drinks. And I would invite all 10 women to get to know one another before the event, so that when we met each other, we weren't wondering, are you someone, Maria, who lifts other women up, or are you someone who's going to compete against me? Because there are definitely two types of women. I think there's that sometimes can be harder than walking into a room of men. And so I learned that we need to really support and lift one another up. And if you want that, you got to be it. And so folks would show up, and we got to meet one another, and we stay friends. So have to be deliberate about it.
Fantastic. Now, you've already told one story about being a woman and having a bit of a disadvantage for that. Were there other issues like that as well?
Absolutely. How many GovCons are in here? Lots of female GovCon folk in the room. When I started, I couldn't find a female mentor who would help me figure out what I was doing, trying to navigate this GovCon space. And so I felt somewhat, it's like the first event of being passed over for the position, had to train my new boss, and now I'm trying to figure out this thing over here. And it would have been great to have a female who would have been able to mentor me along. And as much as I searched, I could not find one. And so it was very often that I was the only female in the room, trying to figure out how to do business with the federal government. And so that was challenging in and of itself. So I look at it from the perspective of having 3 strikes going in. I was female, I was an African American female, and I had no money.
The last was probably the worst.
No source of funds to fund this company. And so oftentimes in the room with all males, and if anyone who does business with the Department of Navy in particular, I learned quickly to send my husband to that meeting. And he told me that. And so I had to learn that piece. Was it right? Not necessarily, but it just happens to be the way that it was. And so I got very comfortable being the only one in the room. I had to learn my way. And so I'm so excited to see so many women here who are doing the thing, as my daughters would say, doing the thing, in the federal space, in the GovCon space, because we truly are making a difference. And I encourage everyone to show up, even if you're the only one in the room.
One of the things I love about GovCon is that it's so mission driven. I mean, yes, we're in this to make money. This is a business. We want to get clients. We want to get revenue and turn it into profit. But so many business owners in GovCon are very focused on, I'm working to improve healthcare for veterans. I'm working to make sure that these buildings are safe. I'm working for whatever the issue might be. And that passion, I think, is really quite motivating. Have you ever had a situation where you were fearful and weren't quite sure what to do as a result of that fear?
As a founder or working?
Well, actually, let's start off with this as a founder. Starting a company is a very gutsy thing to do. You did it smart. You did it by saying, I'm going to talk to people first and see if I can line up some customers. That's a great way of doing it. It's actually the way a lot of GovCon companies do it, where they're basically, working, where they're billing themselves out, they're talking to other folks, and only kind of gradually get going. What was the factor for you in deciding to go forward and start your own company as opposed to staying with PA?
And I think, and to answer your question about beer, what was interesting was, as you asked that, when I was talking to the private equity firms about starting the company, I had one of them say to me, why don't we buy a company and you lead the company for us? And I said, wow, that's amazing. Thank you. I think I have to do this. I hope that other one is such a... Roll forward, that is the company that the team became their portfolio operations group. And so they were one of the first people that I called to say, hey, because I was actually working with another private equity firm who had asked me if I would be a part of deal teams to look at acquiring the company again and be that with them. And so I said, I want to make sure our team was okay, the company was in a good place, our clients were good, I wanted to do that for all the ways. And so when I called the company in Chicago to say, okay, I'm going to give you first dibs, here's the thing. And they said, wow, this is amazing. And I reminded him that I had told him no. Because now he had a team who had done M&A, technology transformations in 5 different countries with private equity, family offices, startup founders, in ways that we had all of a sudden in those years, in those 5 years, gotten a spectrum, a cross-section about the industry and done things and seen things, good and bad, that they were able to benefit from. And we would have never had that if I'd have said yes, buy a company and let's do it. So it was scary to turn down that offer of, because I think you always have to decide between 2 choices. Are you doing the right thing or are you not? I did go home that night that I told him no, going, oh God, I told him no. But I did say no, but you're still going to be a client, right? And he was. So there's that story.
Well, this is a book club, so let's turn to the books. Kathryn, why did you write the book? When in your life journey did you write the book, and what was your thought about why did you do it?
Sure. So I decided to write the book because it was a bucket list item. All of us have something on the bucket list. But I didn't think I had a story to tell. But GovCon changed all that. GovCon helped me figure out what I was going to write about. And it was really about my entrepreneurial experience, the good, the bad, the obstacles, the ups, the downs, the personal setbacks, the business setbacks, and all of that. And so it was during the time when after I had sold the company and I had that 4-year hiatus there under the non-compete I was under, and my daughters were in high school at that time. And so I had the time to write the book, and I had the resources now, right, to write the book. And so I decided to write the book for a couple of reasons. One, it was on the bucket list. For two, I wanted folk who were thinking about being a government contractor to understand that business. And so what's in the book really talks about my journey. All of us have a journey, no matter how we got there, right? But this journey was about journeying into GovCon. And so the stories that I tell in the book is about personal experiences that I had as a government contractor, as a female government contractor at that. It talks about the personal journey of breast cancer diagnoses, the death of my son, the birth of my daughters, having no money, doing all the things that we do, not only as entrepreneurs, but as women. We tackle all of those things simultaneously, and we do them effortlessly, at least that's what it appears, and we do it well. And so that's what the book is about. So it's intended to inspire the next generation of business leaders. It inspires those of you who may be getting started in becoming a government contractor, or those who are already in the midst of it and about to make that transition from small to large, and some of what that looks like as well. So that's why I wrote the book, and I told somebody in the room earlier that my objective was to sell one book. If I sold one book, mission accomplished. My dad bought the first book, so I had to sell 2 books. Mission accomplished. And so I used this book as my calling card. When I bought ATEC in 2010, you can imagine buying a company from a CEO that founded the company. There was a culture that had already been established. And so here I am coming in as the new CEO, and everybody wondering, well, what's next? What is she going to do? And so my objective was to bring down the barriers so that employees could get to know who I was as a person first. Who is Kathy Freeland, as opposed to who's the CEO, Kathy Freeland. That book became my calling card for all employees to get to understand who I am, what I stand for, who I am as the person. That began to bring those barriers down because they were able to understand what I stood for. And as a result, they came to love me, right? That's what I wanted.
We all do.
We all do. But yeah, so that's kind of the reason behind the why, and love to talk about it more there.
What is it that you want the reader to take away from your book?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I would say to know that it can be done. I came from a father with a 6th grade education, the youngest of 5 kids from a small town in Alabama. And so if I can do that, anyone can do that, trust me. And so that's really what I want folk to know, but I also want people to understand that a lot of times people see the end of the thing. They don't understand all the things that went on in the middle. They see the result. They see that the company was successful, that it was sold and all that. But they don't see all the hell that went through in the middle. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that. You guys knew I was thinking it, so I didn't say it. Don't use another one that long. But all the things that went on in the middle. But even in the midst of all the things that went on in the middle, we still thrived in the middle of it. But again, it was the faith foundation that I had to stand on to help me do that. So that's really what I want others to know, that yes, it can be done. It's not for the faint of heart. It's going to take hard work. It's going to take sacrifice. It's going to take leaning on your village, whatever that village looks like, all of that to get you through this entrepreneurial journey. So hopefully that's what they'll take away.
Absolutely. I want to say one thing about your book, which is I felt like there were 3 separate themes going on. One was your very touching personal life story and dealing with your husband and your children as you were essentially raising another child, i.e. the company. Second, of course, was the business journey. What was going on? What problems? What was the government doing to you? How, all of those kinds of issues. And then third is there's really a major educational component to your book where there's a lot of resources there. And that struck me as something you were really trying to provide information to the reader that maybe you had to go to the library for to find in the first place.
So that's a very good point, and Sharon is exactly right. There's every reference that I found, and when I was trying to research how to do this, I pretty much put in the book. And a lot of those references are still very relevant today. I wrote that book in 2009, and everything in it is still very relevant today. GovCon has changed, but the resources remain the same. SBA is still there, SCORE is still there, MBDC is still there. All these resources, never would have thought that by putting that reference information there that it would be relevant, here we are, how many years later.
It's very relevant. Let me turn to you. Why did you write the book?
Yeah. So I gave you guys a little bit of background about why I wrote the book, with P not being all bad. I really had so much respect for our founder. He changed an industry in the ed tech space. And he actually didn't graduate. He attended, but didn't graduate from college. And he wanted to make sure that first generation and students realize that there's this whole matchmaking process that don't self-select out. There's scholarships, there's things you can do, like colleges and universities were looking for different things. And the way that he treated clients and treated people, the way that he had us, spend the evenings looking and memorizing, and the lessons of knowing when to call a customer and when not to. So it's as much of a business book that's just about private equity. And I remember, so here's a man who sold a business for $1 billion, grew it, and when I asked him for his permission if I could interview him about selling the company and the lessons I learned, he was stunned. He's like, what could I possibly teach anyone? I was like, are you kidding me? Like, do you know how many people that you have impacted in such a positive way? And one of the reasons why I'm an angel investor is because when we did have our windfall, two things. One, he said, yay, congratulations, have some, sure thing. Now, give some of that money. You didn't do it yourself. So give that money, find a founder, and invest in someone else, and because it will change their life. And so that is why I find founders that I am deeply aligned on mission and purpose, who are starting out. That money may be money that I may never see again. I sure hope they're successful. I like them. But he taught me that. And, the other thing he said was, he stayed in as the chairman. He said, he asked the management team to put our money back in as much as we wanted. A lot of people thought I was crazy. They were like, hey, clearly you're new to financial stuff. You should talk to your advisor. You should not roll that much in, like the percentage. Somebody talk to somebody, right? You're not doing this without, let's just say that second time, folks are looking at me going, wait, how did you know? And I think it's the same thing as starting a business. I said, I don't understand why anybody wouldn't roll higher than what other people would recommend, because I'm counting on us. And we had a management team that I really believed in. We had clients I believed in, and there was nowhere else that I would want to put that money. And so I will say that, and you and I have had this conversation. If I hadn't have done that, I wouldn't have been able to save my son's life. And I'm so sorry about your story. He had cancer in a way that in 2020, when you talked about fear, it was, COVID was going on. I didn't know COVID was happening. Everybody was going through something. I had cancer at the same time that my son had cancer, and they didn't think my son was going to live. And as the CEO of my own business, I have folks calling me saying that, they were going to have to fire us and they weren't going to be able to pay the bills. They had no idea about my situation. On the other side of it, they'd say to me, why didn't you tell me? And I was, well, why would that matter? Would you have treated them differently? Then you shouldn't yell at someone, even if they don't have cancer. And what happened, I think some of the most valuable lessons in those moments of fear, we were a technology operating partner, remember? So some of the companies, some of the private equity firms, I would say, like, they would buy dumpster fires, which was cool, because then you could fix them, and then they'd be so much more valuable because they were founders that had a real business that they really thought was amazing and more people should use while making money. And so we have one client that was 2 months, and we have been working on this for like 14 months, going away from being on-prem to software as a service. And they said, I'm sorry, I don't know if we're going to be able to pay you. I know there's some lawyers in this room, so I'm sorry, I'll tell you, it was a client who served law firms, and they didn't think the lawyers were going to fail during COVID. Sorry, that's true. And so I said, I am not going to let you fire me. I'm just not, because I'm not going to be the reason that your business goes under. We are your lifeline. I get that you can't pay us right now, so we're going to work for free for the moment. And when your business survives, I expect you to pay me, and I will be sending invoices along the way until you do, because I believe that we are truly going to be transformational, because I believed in us. I was willing to bet on us. And this day, he tells me, I've actually never had anybody say, no, you're not going to fire me. I'm going to still do it. And that quarter, during the first quarter of 2020, turned out to be, because we got done even faster, they were able to white label it, not only not lose their customers, but they were able to white label it. And it was the highest performing quarter of their 20 years in business.
That's fantastic. Sometimes you take the risk and it really pays off.
And then he paid me. That's very glad to hear that, Kelley.
What is it that you want your readers to take away? When somebody reads the book, what are the 2 or 3 thoughts that you want them to walk away with?
I think I really want people to read it that don't know they need to read it. So tell your friends to read it, that they're founders that own businesses, because I think it's the thing you want to read if you're a business founder or owner years before you're getting ready to sell your business. And the takeaways are the things that you can do now in the next couple of years to help grow your business in a way that will be, it's funny, people say, well, you make it so that they look attractive. I say, no, you didn't read my book. It's not about looking attractive. It's actually about being attractive, actually having the thing and being the thing, not just putting lipstick on it. And it's interesting, Lynn and I were talking about when we were coming in tonight, and one of the things I say is to do a due diligence, pay someone, like pay me, pay Lynn, pay someone to do a due diligence for yourself before you're ever in a process, because you are going to have that done. And do you really want to wait and roll the dice to see what's going to be found at, and then you're in the middle of a process to know whether it's good or bad? Give yourself some time to know, inform yourself of what they're going to find, and you can choose on what you want to invest in and what you want to deal with, and what you say, yeah, that's okay. I'm okay with telling someone because I made a business decision to do that, and there's a reason why I did that. And so the takeaways of what you can do over the course of a couple of years as you're thinking about going towards an exit that you can't do in that 6 to 8 weeks of a process.
When I read the book, what I was struck with was 2 things. First of all, the name of the book, Courage to Lose Sight of the Shore. There really is an element of courage. We're talking a little bit about courage and risk and fear. Those things are real. I mean, I don't think those things are just female, but maybe we're just the only ones willing to talk about it. Having a business in some ways is about control and letting go of control. I was talking to a business owner just a couple of days ago, and it's a small company, but he does everything. He is the business development person. He is the one who does the operations. He does the back office work. He does the HR. I said, you don't have a company. You have a job with staff. Other people are helping you do your job. And he didn't have the courage to lose sight of the shore. What I found so compelling about your book was a couple of messages. First is think bigger. Don't think about just what's happening right now, but think about it in the larger context, particularly if and when you're getting ready to do an exit. Second is that the work that you would do for an exit is exactly the same work that you would do in order to have a good company. People will often renovate their houses and then sell them and be very frustrated saying, why didn't I live with there? I love that kitchen. I should have lived in that kitchen. And some business owners do that as well. They make all the changes that are necessary and then they give it to somebody else. Well, a more successful business would probably sell for more. And then third is really trying to dispel the myths. Now you're focusing on dispelling the myths about PE. They are not all horrible people twirling their mustaches, tying women to the railroad tracks and saying, oh, this will be amusing. But they're in this for a reason. And that reason, of course, is money, but it's also that they like growing businesses. They like being part of creating jobs. They like that kind of growth and being able to appeal to whether it's PE or some other type of buyer is a really important element if you're thinking bigger. If you're thinking solely only about the numbers matter. I don't mean to imply otherwise. But it's one of multitude of factors, and I felt that your book really brought that out.
I mean, I talk about culture, we talked about that a little bit, but I do, Elizabeth is here tonight. She was on our management team. She helps female business owners with our executive presence. We were all in sync as a management team, and one of the things I would also say is if you think about a strategic buyer, it could be a competitor, and as you get close, like those deals may not go through. And there was one company that we looked at that we thought for sure, it was a sure thing. It was a sure thing.
Never sure.
It was a sure thing. Never sure thing. Oh my God, they didn't exchange some data. It was so close to the very end. We wanted to really, at closing, be ready to go because we knew it was a sure thing. And in literally the last minute, it came down to a culture clash. And we put in a gritty on what the go forward was going to be. And so we didn't do that transaction. And so that advice about being transparent, yes, you want to be, and yes, you do all of those things, and be very transparent because you want to make sure with your private equity partner that you're finding the right fit, but also be aware that maybe some deals as you're going through it, especially the strategics, don't go through. They don't go through, even though you think that they're a sure thing.
Absolutely not. Absolutely true. I'm going to take the liberty of kind of talking about my book just for a moment. Why did I write it? Why did you write your books? Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Very, very well done. I did it because when I opened up sbLiftOff, I basically put a sign on the door saying, I'll talk to anybody. And I talked over a period of 3 or 4 years to literally hundreds of business owners. And I found there was a huge amount of commonality in what they were saying. The stories, how personal the stories were, the struggles that they had, the fears, the challenges. And I said, I can't solve those problems, but many of these people are going to want to sell their companies. So I started saying, what are the questions that people ask me? And how can I answer these questions for smart people who may not know a lot about M&A, and to give them straight answers. So things like, is my company sellable? How do you maintain confidentiality during this process? What is due diligence? What's the process? How do deals get paid for? things that people who are professionals in the field wake up knowing, and it's not an issue. But for somebody who's been growing a company, you may not know about seller financing or equity rollover. So to try and get that information out there. There used to be an old commercial about an educated consumer is our best customer. And I felt that way about sbLiftOff. That if I could get information out there, I was doing a service for those people. If they hired me, that would be fantastic. I would love that. That's great. But if they didn't, then I had done right anyway. So it really felt like it was a good thing to do, in addition to, of course, being a good business process and all the rest of that. And it's worked out that way. So really quite delightful.
It's true. And with the founders that I work with, I'll say before I come on to be working with you, read my book. Let me know if you still want to work with me, right? Because it's true. What I say, that wasn't just to sell a book. It's what you see is what you get, and it really does help. Because we may not be for everybody, so it helps as far as being a calling card. And I would also say there were several people in this room who said they wanted to write a book. You should. I will tell you, one of the last moments I had with my mom before she passed away was when my book came in, and I got to hand her the first copy. And Bill, who's the founder that I talked about, he actually passed away right before the book was launched. And I can tell you that was such a gift to be able to have done that. So if you're thinking about writing a book, don't wait. It's going to be great.
I'd like to open it up to the audience to ask any questions. Yes, Rebecca.
Guys, a question.
Absolutely, please.
So, in publishing your 3 books, self-published, used a publisher, talk to us about if you are one of these people in the audience that's interested in doing that. What's the avenues available at this point? I can't yell.
Let me repeat that, which is, if in fact somebody in the audience is interested in writing a book, how do you go about doing it? Do you self-publish? Do you work with a publisher? How do you go about it? Is that a fair assessment?
Your first book, how did you do it?
Okay.
Sure. So I self-published. I also engaged a ghostwriter to help me to write the book. So I had no experience on how to do that either, right? And so I had a great ghostwriter. They say that you not typically meet your ghostwriter. That's what they call a ghostwriter. You're not supposed to see them. But I insisted I meet my ghostwriter. And the approach that she took was, it's almost like an interview. She had a list of questions, because I told her the type of book I wanted to write and why I wanted to write it, the subject, all that. So she asked me a series of questions. She turned my answers into prose until we got through every chapter of the book, and then she put it all together. And so decided to self-publish. My name is not a branded name, right? Like Steven Spielberg, something like that.
Oh,
so
you are in the GovCon community.
So the big publishing houses, and they had to educate me, right? The big publishing houses may not take the book because all these things, and so I decided to self-publish. And so I published under Freebridge Publishing. Free is the first 4 digits of my married name, and Bridge is the last 6 or 7 digits of letters of my maiden name. So Freebridge Publishing. And so I took that route to write the book. It took about a year or so to do it from start to finish, and that's just really had a dedicated time to do that. I know in some cases it may take longer depending on how much time you have to put in to do it. But that was the route I took, and I agree with you. Every one of us in this room has a story to tell, and it's just a matter of how do you tell that story and put it in the book. And whatever your motivation is for writing the book, that's fine too. At least you have done what it is that you have decided to do as far as being an author and being a writer. So that was my turn.
Kelley, how did you do your book?
So I went through a publisher, and they did offer to do ghostwriting. They had different options that you could pick from ghostwriting to creative. Bill, the company we had worked for, we did creative. He was marketing. So we had a proofreader, an art director, right? We had the whole team. So I was not about to embark on a book with him unless I had a whole team of creative. So I did write it myself. And I'll tell you the most painful part. I was so sick of reading my book by childhood published. And the reason is because you do like the foreshadowing and you have to go back. And so you'll say things like, now, I know I just used that term, but wait, I know we're in chapter 2, but in chapter 8, I want to explain all about that. And then you go on. And then maybe in chapter 5, you say, now remember when I told you you want to do your own due diligence. This is why. This is the story. And so when you move things around, you have to read the whole book again to make sure it makes sense. It also does help you to stop making edits because you get tired of reading your book. You're like, I'm not moving anything to a different chapter. No, it's perfect. I think the hardest part of writing a book was the red string and the theme. And so for me, I had grown up on the Chesapeake with my grandparents. And, I'm a big person, loves the water, loves to go out. And for me, one of the things that I had talked about was a very vivid picture of fear when you go out and you've got no one there. And so, who do you have in the boat with you? Because that's it. So that choosing wisely, whether it's clients or employees and all of that. But if you've ever been late as a teenager to dinner with your grandfather who has binoculars, who's going to report everything that happened while you were over across the sandbar, if it starts to storm and it starts to rain, you're still going to go just as fast. And the rain will feel like bee stings. And so that's kind of where I started with my book of some of it and owning your own business will feel like bee stings. Do you slow down? Do you seek shelter? Or do you speed up and knowing that it's going to hurt for less time, but you're going to be home for dinner, that piece. And so that was why I came up with a theme. But that piece was the hardest thing. So think about something that you love that others can relate to, even outside of your story, because I know that certainly helped. Because PE can be a dry subject at dinner parties, and so everybody can relate
Let's all
to.
talk about Heaton.
Say it again. And so I could talk about sailing, and I could talk about being on the water, and so that made it easy with some of the concepts that I explained for private equity, but had the cover design and all that done by professionals that were not me.
My book was published by Forbes. Forbes, of course, publishes business books, and you've got to apply, and they get lots of submissions, and they take a certain number of them. They gave me a ghostwriter. They gave me other support. The ghostwriter and I worked together for about 4 or 5 months, and I looked at the text, and I said, this is not me. This is not my book. I don't like the organization of it. And he did exactly what I told him to do. It was not him, it was me. And I said, I know how to write. I just have to start at the beginning and start going. And it was, now I'm done with chapter 4, now I'm done with chapter 7. And it was a slog. It was, a lot of writing over about a year plus probably. But because I was working with Forbes, that did help with the distribution. They came up with some cover art. I, of course, have wonderful people at sbLiftOff who said, we're not doing that. We're going to do something very different, and we ended up with where we are and very pleased with that. So we basically did not self-publish, but Forbes basically has an arm that does business books, and that's what we did.
I found it so much harder when I started writing. When I started to write it was the same thing, this doesn't sound like me. I'm writing it, but it doesn't sound like me. And so I recommend to a few folks in the room, they were sharing stories, Rebecca, about, things that have even happened in the past week and how exciting, how fun that was. I said, record that. Because there will be things that you will forget about that moment. We think that we're going to remember anything, but tell the story and write it as if you're talking to someone.
And that is a critical component. People want to hear stories. They don't want to have a recitation of facts.
Right.
They want to hear, well, I walked into the room and this guy looked at me like I had 3 heads because of X, Y, and Z. And the stories are what makes the book compelling.
I agree, and I think it helps to relate to what the book is about, right? And they can see themselves in the pages. What is written,
Mhm.
So trying to make it as personal as you can really, I think, draws the rear end.
Absolutely.
I can really see myself doing that, as well. So that's just a point.
Yes, question.
Hi, I'm Anisha Sarath. I own Wilmington Technology. It's a .com IT traffic business. So my question is a little bit about the growth cycle and being the only female in the room or the only female that is out there talking to the recruiters. So you get to a certain point of growth. We do a lot of it by the root course. We do a lot of it by yourself. You're wearing a lot of different hats. And you get to a point where you're trying to get to the next level, to like a mid-tier company, and you can't find the people to bring to the table because you're now competing post-COVID. We're competing with like the Raytheons, and sorry, there's gonna be Raytheon people in here, but big businesses. And so, what's your advice on something like that? Like, how do you draw the right talent to the table to help you get to the next level?
I'll take a stab at that. It's difficult. It's a lot of hit and miss because there's a lot of bad actors, I would say, in our community who say they can do one thing and bring them in and they really can't do what their resume says they think they do. And so it really is a trial and error, but I'd also say it's about your network of people who you know. So I've been more successful by just talking to my network and say, hey, I'm looking, for instance, I just brought on a chief growth officer last year because we're about to make that shift that you're talking about from small business to, what's it called, other than small business, large business. There's no tweener space, which is what I need. And so I hired a chief growth officer. But I wanted to hire a chief growth officer, but I didn't know where to start. What was it that I was looking for in this role? What was that person's role going to be? What part of what I was doing was I going to now delegate to this person to do? What was the strategy behind bringing on a chief growth officer? What were those characteristics that I thought I needed for where we were in our growth trajectory, to help me to grow the company? And it was my network of folk who I tapped into to say, hey, you have a chief growth officer. Why did you bring that person on board? And have they achieved the things that you wanted them to achieve? And if not, why not? How many did you go through before you found the right one? That type of thing. And then do you have a recommendation for someone I could talk to? It was through that process that I found the chief growth officer that I have today. And so, but it is a slug, I guess, to try to find the right people to put in the right positions that you need. So I think the first thing was to figure out what was it that I needed at that time, and then set out on a course to try to find the person, and then have some hits and misses along the way till you find the right one. But I definitely would say start with who you know in the industry who's done it well and was hired well, and try to take some of that advice. And if you can't get there, then there's headhunters that cost a lot. But even that is not always successful, because I tried that too and spent a lot of money and didn't get what I needed for that. So just network amongst your colleagues and see who's
A question for you, Kathryn. Did you find that you were hiring people who already had other jobs and you were hiring them away from those jobs?
Absolutely. And what I also wanted to hire was folk who had done it before. So for instance, I didn't want to hire someone whose entire career had been in a large company. I wanted someone who had come up the ranks. They worked in small businesses, and they worked in mid-tier companies, and they worked in large and saw the transition of some of the companies that they worked at. My chief growth officer today has been in all three. And the company he was most recent at, that company grew from small to mid-tier, and he was a part of that transition. And that's what really interested me in him, because he had been there and done that, and he understood what it was I was trying to do, and now he could see, he knew exactly the vision I had and what I needed, to help us to get there. So just look at it from that perspective as well as another.
Nancy, do you have a question?
A comment and a question. First of all, it's really nice to have a conversation that's about business where people are also talking about having children and having husbands and having cancer and having all of the issues that we have as human beings and as women. So my question for the panel, you've all been successful. What were the things that you brought to your business journey as a woman that was actually helpful? Not a challenge, but something that really gave you a different spin on things and helped you in your journey?
I'm going to take the lead on that one because when I first started to go into M&A as a business and working in the lower mid-market, to be honest with you, I was very concerned about the fact that I was a woman. If so many of the business owners were men, would they take me seriously? God knows I've been in business for decades, and I've often been the only person there, but the only woman there. But this was going to be different because I was going to be talking to them about their life and their future and very intimate kinds of things. I found that actually being a woman was an advantage for a couple of reasons. One is that so many of my male colleagues, there's so many of them, they're males, so I stood out simply by the fact that I wasn't. That was one. Two, so many of my male colleagues really just focused on the numbers. They focused on the process, and it was very cut and dry to them. I tell a story in the book about giving a presentation, and there's a very well-known commercial banker who was speaking, and he said, M&A is easy. It's just about the numbers. And I'm up on a panel, and it wasn't nice, but I laughed because there's so much more going on than just the numbers. There's so many emotional ties to this. There is a fight in the business owner between their head and their heart, and their fear and their ambition and their concerns. And so I felt like as a woman, I was used to reading a room. I was used to walking in and saying, that person's not happy, and it might have nothing to do with us. But, really working that room in a different way. And I think women do that better, or they have to, than men do. Kelley, what your thoughts?
That's interesting because I think I'm very grateful to my mom and dad for this because my dad never treated me like a girl, right? I mean, I did ballet, but I was also expected to pick up the nails around the house when we were building a house. Like he just, and I think my mom, I remember, and it's actually at the elementary school when we had a new principal and she had these rules where fifth graders had to wear, full-length pants, they couldn't wear shorts. And because it would be inappropriate for them to do that. And all the other students, and by the way, our elementary school did not have air conditioning.
Oh, lovely.
Right. And I went home and I told my mom, I was like, you just won't believe this woman. Like, she's come in and she said that we can't, like, I've never left the house inappropriate. Like, if somebody does that, why don't we deal with it? And my mom said, well, do you want to go talk to her? I was like, well, you can do that? Yeah, let's do it. And she put me in the car, went to the school, and I said, I don't understand. My mom would never let me leave inappropriate. We don't have, air conditioning in this school. What are you doing? She listened. She changed it. The next morning, she got on the PA, and she made the announcements, and she said she would deal with those that didn't come to school appropriate. And she offered me my first job as the manager of our newly formed that day school store. And I could help manage it into this spot. She's like, I need you. And
what a
so,
sense of power. To be able to give that to a child, to say, I see you, I hear you, I'm going to respond to what it is you're saying. That's phenomenal.
and if you don't like it, you can either complain about it, which isn't going to work because I'm not listening, or you can decide you're going to go fix it. And so that's, I guess I owe it to my mom. And so I think one of the hardest things, I think, obviously I've run into situations of being a woman in private equity. I think probably the hardest was losing a client that he wanted to acquire a business, and he offered me unsolicited a certain amount. And he said, this is a great offer for you. And I said, well, no, that's a good offer. Thank you, but we're not for sale. And he said, no, this is a great offer for you. And I said, thank you, but we're not for sale. And he said, you obviously don't know what you're doing because this is a great offer for you. And he said to me, he goes, well, Kelley, what is it going to take to close this deal? I said, well, I've written a book on it. We're not a culture fit. And he was stunned. And that really is what it came down to because I didn't want him to be my boss.
Absolutely. Now, Kathryn, you've talked about the disadvantage of being a woman, being an African American, having young children, etc. Did you ever find being a woman an advantage?
Yeah, we come correct, at all times. And so we just come correct. And I think so. Yeah, outside of programs like the Women-Owned Small Business programs that many of us may be a part of. Obviously, there was an advantage of being a female to be able to be in those programs, obviously. But I think we bring a different perspective. And so anytime I'm in a group where there's mostly males, I think it's about bringing that one female perspective. I think we see things differently. We approach things slightly differently. We have things that are more important to us than it might be to our counterparts. And so those are the types of things I think that, I brought to the table. One, I'm not afraid to say something. That's always been the case, not afraid to say something, because we always have something to add of value, right? And then also, I wasn't afraid, at first I had fear, but then I got over my fear. But my dad raised 4 daughters, and so it was important that we were able to stand up and speak for ourselves, that type of thing. And so raising daughters now, they're 31-year-olds now, and I think I took a lot from how I was raised by raising them similarly, even though came up at very different eras and times. But I think if you ask them that question, they would say my mom is no nonsense and she leads from the front. I tell the story oftentimes when we're in venues that I don't sit in the back. And they didn't understand why I didn't sit in the back. And so I always said what Rosa Parks said, I don't have to. Therefore, you don't have to. And so that's about leading from the front as far as I'm concerned, right? And so we show up, we do what we have to do, and can we not lean into whatever it is that we're doing. And so as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, all of that. But I say it's not for the faint of heart. It's not, but we just make stuff happen. Yeah.
Fantastic. What a wonderful way to close this part of the program. I want to thank everyone for being here and listening to the panel. I think that there's been fantastic food that I hope that you'll all help yourself to. I want to thank Kelley. Thank you so much. Kathryn, thank you so much. And thank you for being here.